Thank you. Well, here we are. Welcome. We have questions, so let's start.
Yes, so we regularly send emails on HubSpot. I
Mhm.
wanted to ask that sometimes when we send these emails, I find that we have suppressed contacts as part of the send.
Mhm.
I wanted to know if there's a way to unsuppress these contacts within HubSpot, or if that isn't the case, how could we um, increase the number we are sending to? Because I find that these suppressed contacts, this email is not being sent to. So how do we optimize the send by including these suppressed contacts?
Yep, it's a very good question. The the thing to keep in mind is that unless there is a specific exclusion list or the suppression list that you can control, chances are you're talking about the native HubSpot checkbox that it says don't send to unengaged contacts. So in terms of technicality, let me share my screen and I'll show you it's pretty straightforward to untick that and to say send to everyone pretty much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. Um, so when we click on create email and yeah, let's use this. So within here, when you set up everything and if you click on review and send, don't send to unengaged contacts is on.
Okay.
So um no, actually it's this tick box. And what that means is that if you also have it on, that's exactly what it does. People that have not engaged previously will not be included. Now, you're right, though, that in a way it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at times, because let's say in January you sent the email to 100,000 people and you've been sending it for a few weeks, and actually out of those, only 20,000 engage. So chances are from February, I mean, there's no exact science on those numbers as to when it kicks in and so on, because there is more definitions here on what is unengaged. There you go, haven't opened your last 11 emails and so on. However, because different emails have different contexts, so is it possible that people would have engaged with one of the emails, or is it possible that the email engagement was not tracked because of all the GDPR side of things, the iOS update that happened now 3 years ago, I think. Now what's going to be happening with France and Italy, that we're not allowed to send emails and track them, and therefore we wouldn't know whether the engagement works or not. So there's a lot of stuff that comes into play, and this is there for a reason. However, very rightly, it's good for you to be able to drip feed people back into the list. So with the example where I started, let's say in January you sent to 100,000, and then from February for a few months you've been sending to 20,000 only, who are the most engaged ones. It would make sense now in July, for you to send to 10 more thousand from the remaining 8,000 that were suppressed. And the way to do that is actually by being um, quite strategic with the setup, because this thing is on and off, which means that it's either everyone that HubSpot considers unengaged or no one. So it wouldn't be able to differentiate and wouldn't be able to take out 10,000 people out of those or X amount of people out of those for you to be able to reintroduce. So what I would probably say is have your master list, if that's 100,000 people,
Yeah.
have an exclusion list that you create with a segment, well, yeah, have the exclusion list and create a segment for that. And the segment should have the following criteria. So there is this thing since, there you go, since last engagement. That's the property based on which that other thing is working. And our standard is 11, which means that what you could do is that you could say that is 10, or you could say that this is again 11. However, out of this very list, you could, because with the example that we're working with, HubSpot would have picked up 80,000 people in this list. And once you have this list, basically you might want to save it as static, because obviously otherwise it's a dynamic value and it's going to change every time. But for the purpose of what we want, you can save it as a static, as a one-off. And then afterwards, once it processes, we'll be able to create a sublist. It's a little bit of a workaround, but it's a case of carefully re-engaging with the audience, because what we're seeing more and more with various clients is that their domain reputations gets impacted. Emails keep not being sent or not being received, bouncing. We even had the extreme case of, one of it is HubSpot quarantining most of the contacts in the client's account. Then Microsoft, not banning, but borderline banning to email addresses for sequences, because clients have this, and when I say clients, I have it as well, but I can control my urges. They have this desire of sending at scale with the intention of obviously getting business, which makes a lot of sense. However, what they don't quite understand, very often senior leadership, because the people on the ground, we know that there is rules and so on. But if your boss says to you, "Oh, we have 100,000 people in the database, why do you keep sending 20? This is sent to everyone." And you could reason as much as you want, you can give them the information, but if they decide not to, and if they have different style of leadership, which I wouldn't even call leadership, but anyway, of management, then if they push you, it is possible that it's going to backfire. And then it's going to be a very, very slow road to recovery, if you ever recover, depending on how you do it. So, and that's why, again, even with us, as I said, I also want to be able to get a lot of emails, but the reality is that we haven't done email marketing at scale as such. Of course, we've sent to a couple of hundred people, but also I'm realistic about, well, I want to be realistic about what is the impact going to be, because you send an email with the intention of someone coming back to you. But what happens if you just send 100,000 emails and 1% of those people reaches out? That's 1,000 people. Chances are you don't have the infrastructure, the sales team, the process, and so on to handle those people. So what's the point of sending it anyway? Because you would be lost opportunities in a way. So that's the psychology and the management around it. Yeah, there you go. This has now processed, and then from within here, you can have I mean, of course, it says it's not active, but create a random sample. So once you click here, it's going to ask you what is the sample size that you want, which obviously if this was our 80K unengaged, we would say that we want a 10,000 sample. And then when we get to send the email, then when we get to send an email, we would say send to this list and this list, for example. So this is going to be the one with the 20,000 that were engaged in the first place, and that's going to be the 10,000 that we're now testing. And don't send to the people that are excluded. And then this way, now you send it to 30,000. Of course, still not 100,000, but as I said, if those people have been suppressed for a long time, it's important to reintroduce them gradually. And very often, there's no exact science. And as I said, very often the fact that the system allows you to send a certain amount doesn't mean that you need to send a certain amount. So with sales emails, for example, HubSpot itself allows you to send up to 500 emails per day, but you must never. So the fact that the option is there, you must never. But as I said, people say, "Oh, but the system that allows us." Yeah, but common sense shouldn't. So this is where backlashes happen. Oh, Giselle, you're on mute.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
may add something as well. If you're working with marketing emails, you can also use the trick of scenes that Ellie showed. And whenever you get to that point, you can send an automated email saying, hey, do you still want to receive updates from us? Is there certain, even using forms, is there certain type of content that you want to receive? So in that case, you get even an engagement from the contact and you keep them, receiving the emails. And also there are very some cool integrations like zero bounds because databases decay every year. I think it's something like about 30%. I'm not sure of the percentage, but it was quite a lot. So if you integrate that with HubSpot, you will decrease the bounce rate and will keep your domain healthier if you're working with large databases. So those are two things that I wanted to add, just in case.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. And one thing that very rightly you kind of prompt him to think about is exactly the size of the databases. And I made up those numbers, but what kind of size are you working with? Is
In
it?
total, do you mean in total or
Yeah.
the
Yeah. In total, how many contacts do you have that are marketing?
in total we have over 420,000 contacts.
Mhm.
As marketing contacts, I would say I'm not too sure of the exact number, but I would say just under half.
Okay, which
Yeah.
means that you have big enough database to be able to do A/B testing. So if you're not doing that yet, I strongly encourage that as well, because it's in part of the engagement metric is whether someone had opened the email, which means that if, as you send in the email anyway, if you were to send split testing or like different headlines, subject lines rather, that could potentially increase the chance of people opening it, and therefore you could pick up people that had not engaged in a while. And what kind of segmentation do you have on those? And what type of emails you send in the first place? Is it mostly industry related stuff? Is it what
Yeah,
kind
so
of
it's we are a beauty and hair exhibitions company, so
Mhm,
we organize events all around the UK
mhm,
on beauty and hair and spa products. So we our segmentation is basically we send out a lot of emails,
mhm,
newsletters. We send out awards emails. We send out exhibition emails like Exprom communications and visitor communications. Um, we send out exhibitor promotions as well. So it's a wide range of emails we send out. In terms of segmentation, we have, I would say, good data segmentation. We try to keep our email address unique in our database. So each contact have an unique email address. So yeah, our database. I am working on it to get it to improve. However, yeah, that's just a snapshot of our database in a
yeah.
nutshell.
Thank you for that. Um, One thing when it comes to sending emails, and of course, don't tell the full domain and so on, but what email are you sending from? From a person or from marketing at, events at, survey at, as in
Yes.
one of those? Yeah?
Oh no, we don't send it from a personal email. We do send it from market at
Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
the brand.
Yeah.
So
So that nowadays is like a flag for the AI spam filters, which means that those are the emails that tend to not land in the inbox and therefore have the suppression. So I strongly recommend, even if you were to make up a fictitious character and call them John Doe at the brand, then you can still have the reply to setting to go to marketing at in case someone replies and obviously the other one is made up and not monitored and so on. But if it comes from a person in a way, as opposed to just a generic marketing email, because to an extent that's how it's seen, this is something that you could help yourself with. And I'm not sure if you're already using it in terms of the personalization tokens on the sender and on the email address itself, but that's something could help as well.
So you would recommend sending emails through a personal email instead of a domain like marketing at or info at. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, very much so. Yes, it's still. Let me share my screen again.
Because I've heard that sending it through a personal email will damage that domain.
No, that's the thing. It all depends on how you send it. If you're sending it via sequence, so many emails, by all means. If you send it via the marketing email, it will not. And also, given the size of the database and the type of emails, if you haven't yet, it might be worth you considering transactional emails add-on. Also, you might want to consider dedicated IP, which I think that if you have the transactional email add-on, you get the dedicated IP as well. But yeah, those are the things that could help. In terms of the sender, for example, here, if I was to send it from this, let's say, it's not going through my inbox, it's still going through HubSpot servers, which basically means that it's still it it goes through HubSpot server, so it's still seen as a marketing email, still has the footer at the bottom and everything else. However, if I say my name here and I have my name here somewhere to in a way sign it, that tends to get better results at the moment. We've done this with another client, and I was surprised as well to an extent because it was a completely cold database from the point of view that from an email point of view, because those were people that were familiar with the owner of the business. However, the email didn't go out from the owner of the business. It came out from an alias, which means that that person doesn't even exist in the business. And we have obviously the workflows, the connected inboxes, everything else set up to allow us to monitor if someone was to respond. And yes, we had even the first response a couple of days ago say, "Oh yeah, I remember speaking with the owner 10 years ago." That's what they said. And now I'd love to catch up and so on. So that is also very important.
Yeah, I didn't know that honestly. It's quite interesting actually.
And you can use personalization tokens here, which means that you could say the contact owner, there you go, contact owner full name, which means that fine, the default value could be the Uspeh team or could be me. However, if you're in our database and Giselle is the owner, you're going to receive the email from Giselle. So then when you get to respond at one point, you're just picking up the conversation with her anyway, as opposed to knowing that, oh, marketing's emailing you, and then someone from another department is going to get in touch. So that's another thing. And that's something that's helped us. So if you were to do a multi-channel approach, we're using Meet Alfred to complement that. But we have no affiliation, but it's LinkedIn automation. And basically what that means is that by the way, here's the alias, and you can do exactly the same thing with the email address. You can still have the personalization token so that the alias then matches the email address based on which perceivingly the email is sent from. But with Meet Alfred, what we do is that we have an LinkedIn like outreach sequence that, and of course, this is where we need lower numbers because LinkedIn has limitations as well and so on. But that works for sales and more strategic emails quite a lot, where we have Meet Alfred to view the profile of the person, like a recent post a couple of days later, and then we send the email. And then the email has statistically higher chance of being open because now the person on the other side is familiar with the name. And it's just this curiosity. So it's a lot of psychology on that. And actually, I was thinking about having another dedicated hack exactly on the emails and what we're seeing and what we're finding because more and more clients are getting caught in the trap of not being able to send emails. And the conversations I'm having with them is what is the messaging? Because the messaging should not always be sales. It should be a lot of educational content.
Yeah.
And very often, again, the business has the urge to, oh, well, let me tell you about our new product. That's fine, but if that's the first time you've communicated with me for a long time and you're just telling me about a product, it's not gonna fly. Give me tips on how to position my brand better at an exhibition. Give me a tip on how to market myself better and how to create partnerships and all those things. Oh, and now you're saying that this is the new product and that's how you can help me. But very often brands rush into asking for something before they have given value.
Mm. Yeah. I do find that as well. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
quite
think so.
um so meet Alfred. I will look into this.
Mhm.
It's a LinkedIn automation platform for
Yeah.
sales.
And they actually have omni-channel setup as well. So when it comes to sequences, again, because of the smaller numbers, you
Yeah.
can even automate the emails to be sent through Meet Alfred as well, should you want to. You may not want to because it doesn't have direct connection with HubSpot. We are working on API integration, and if anything, I will be reaching out to them to suggest that we become the official integrator. So I'll keep you posted because it makes a lot of sense, and quite a lot of the other platforms do it, whereby something happens on the other platform, they have the analytics and just gets recorded into HubSpot.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That was very informative. Thank you. I'm just thinking of any other question I might want to ask. Let me-
Okay, while you think, Sharif, we received some other questions via email that I want to share with Nelly today since we're here.
Yeah.
So one of the questions was, have you tried the HubSpot connector for Claude?
Yes, we have. And this is where there's a little bit of a confusion as to what it does, because some clients think that the HubSpot connector for Claude is the Claude connection to HubSpot's MCP. And it's not quite like that. So the HubSpot connection with Claude basically allows you, while, and even with ChatGPT, it allows you whilst you're in your LLM of choice to use HubSpot as one of the sources based on which to retrieve answers. So it's a little bit like Breeze on steroids because obviously some we have clients that I've actually had that conversation with a couple of weeks ago, where they were saying to me that they wanted Claude connected to be able to, so that one of their senior leadership could find out how many deals we have open without having to log into HubSpot, without knowing where to look and so on. I said, well, but that's available within Breeze, so why don't they just use Breeze? And I said, well, because Claude already has different connectors with Zero, has different connectors with project management systems, so with different parts of the business, and therefore it makes sense for them to remain in Claude so that they could cross-reference data across the multiple platforms. Um, so yes, we have used it. We have done a lot of cool stuff. And one thing to keep in mind is that at the moment it's primarily to retrieve data. When it comes to writing data, you can still do it, but there's slightly different settings, different ways of doing stuff. And I guess that I always go back to what is you trying to do? Because probably 3 weeks ago, I was at a meeting with a client, and the client asked me, "Well, you listen to a lot of podcasts and books and so on. So, out of the podcast people, who is the AI guru that you follow?" And then, I don't. And I was, oh, but I thought that you use AI a lot. And I said, I do. We do as a business. However, what I focus on is digesting crazy amounts of content and When I say crazy, in the last 4 years, I'm now up to 210 books. That's only the audiobooks that I've listened to, let alone all the podcasts and so on. But those books are based on the business knowledge, how to leverage the business, and then of course using AI as an accelerator. Because just following people that talk about AI, if you don't have the direction of what you want to do, where you want to go. So yeah, it's dependent on, yeah, everyone could connect Claude. Everyone could use Claude to even create landing pages, so on. But should they? Probably not. Um, but again, so it depends on what is it they're trying to achieve. So the question is
Yeah,
a little bit vague
I
to be able
guess,
to answer.
yeah, I guess some people are still cautious about connecting it and
Mhm.
they want to know, is it worth it? So I guess that's one of the questions. Some businesses are still not opening the gates to full AI use. So I guess it was related to that. But yes, I've been having fun playing with AEO and Claude and HubSpot, and it's cool. It's cool because, well, first, if you're not an SEO expert, it helps a lot. And for instance, you can get the outside scope, like if you put the URL, but it also tells you like what's the ID of the page within HubSpot and stuff like that. So yes, it's like you said, Grease on steroids.
Absolutely. And yes, and I think that businesses need to remember that adopting AI doesn't mean everything transforming AI
Yeah.
and you have three robots in the office. It's just take one simple process that is very simple and very manual.
Hmm.
For example, reviewing VAT on invoices for the quarterly VAT return. That has to happen. It's a legal compliance. I mean, chances that people have accountants and so on, but let's say they look at it themselves and they are checking certain things. They look at the invoice and they see if there is VAT, yes, no. Actually, could we claim the VAT? And then the system needs to know whether the VAT for this specific thing could be claimed back because of is it for purchase in this country, for a specific type of purchase, and so on. So it's in take that, see how it works, implement it, move on. Because with every single time you implement AI, should you implement it successfully, which is why I start small, you get time back, and then with that headspace and time that you have back, you can now think of the next thing, and it's just perpetual moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I don't know if there's more questions here. If not, I'll go ahead and jump with another one that we received.
Sharif?
Yeah,
Can you?
sure. Go on. Go on.
Okay. So the question is, when and why should we use line items on HubSpot?
That's a very interesting question. So, the, and especially in line with Revenue Hub coming up with contracts. So the stereotypical thing is that if you have one deal, so a single transaction, they sell multiple things, it just makes sense to have one deal with multiple line items. Now, if it's two different transactions for various reasons, because maybe one of them has a PO, the other one doesn't, maybe one of them starts 2 months later. So whatever the reason, but it's two distinct transactions and two distinct timelines and so on, then you can have legitimately two deals and um, to have one line item in each. I guess that as I was talking it through, what crossed my mind as a concept is that if you have a deal open for something and then something else comes up, more likely than not, you should be in a position to just add it to the existing deal. Unless, obviously, it's something that is for way in the future. Because let's say someone wants to get from us and ongoing support. Well, the onboarding is like a fixed thing. So it takes as long as it takes, as in we scope it, we tell the client how long it's going to take. And whilst we're doing the negotiation um, for the onboarding in terms of scope, price, timelines, if at that point the client then says, "Oh, we also want ongoing support," we have two options. We can either add it as a line item and then the line item to be recurring. So because on every line item, you could specify whether it's a one-off payment, when the billing starts, whether it's recurring, what frequency, and all that stuff. So at that point, we can add both, and then we can add, yeah, and then we can just have one deal for both. Of course, if they have the onboarding, we have closed the deal, we have delivered on the onboarding, and then they say, oh yeah, we will benefit from having support. By that time, the original deal is closed one, and it makes sense to create another deal with a single line item. One thing to keep in mind is that there is some legislation which is, what was it called? FRS 102 revenue recognition changes. So in the UK specifically, but the mind you is, from what I understand, it's already been like that in the US for quite some time. But in the UK, recently, as of the beginning of this year, companies that are software companies, where people pay for like the software, the licenses. If there is onboarding for set license, then the onboarding and the line item has to be part of the same invoice, of the same deal for revenue recognition. So it's part of the new financial law. So I think that there's also a point to be said that first need to make sure that legislation is complied to. Second, I always ask, what is it you're trying to get out of it, regardless of whether you're using single deals or multiple line items or single line items. As a business, what it is that you want to be able to report on, because that's the thing that very often informs what is the best way to structure the data model, so that we could say, oh, in this specific case, makes sense to be XYZ, to be, let's say, multiple deals with individual line items, but linked to one contract, and we report on the contract. So that all depends.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I have one more question, but I think we'll be out of time because it's a very broad question about setting up the customer portal for service. So I don't
Okay.
think we'll have time for that today.
Well, I could very easily give it a try. I mean, by all means, Sharif, if you have any other questions or if you think that those things are also relevant for what you're doing, I can see how far I can answer.
I've got a question, but it's not really about customer service.
So go for it then.
So I'm tasked with cleaning our database in HubSpot, going through our duplicate data, contacts mainly, and some companies. As I go through the contacts, the duplicates, I find that when I complete a set of contacts, the amount of contacts that it says we have on file stays the same. So that number never decreases. It says you have over 10,000 contacts, even after I've gone through a set amount of duplicates. I was wondering, because we also use Qualify, which is a HubSpot deduplication platform. We've got some of those properties within HubSpot. Is there an efficient way to clean our data within HubSpot, specifically deduping in HubSpot? That's what I was wondering.
Well, yeah, Qualify or Dedupli or Data Hub, those are the things to be able to do it at scale. Of course, you could do it through the API, but then it's a little bit trickier because first, and again, I'm not quite sure how technical you are, what kind of technical resource we have within the team. But what you could do is that you could well, you need to have a system within the API that takes a contact, that looks through the whole database, figures out whether there is a fuzzy match or an exact match. Again, you need to specify the rules. And then after it identifies them, it needs to have the ID of the first contact and the second contact. And then you need to have next part of the code to actually do the merge. With with the other systems. Now, when you say 10,000, where did you get the number 10,000? Was that just an example number, or are you seeing that number somewhere? Because you were talking about having a lot more contacts in the database. So what I'm trying to understand is that, is there a certain system that
Yeah.
is telling you how many duplicates you have? Is in the qualify, or
No,
is it something?
that's within HubSpot. So, for example, not for example, it says you have 10,069 total duplicate issues. If I go through, for example, 50 duplicate issues, that number will still say 10,069. It won't decrease.
Interesting. Do you have Data Hub Pro or above?
I don't believe so, no.
Because usually what HubSpot does, which makes it very interesting for me, what HubSpot does is that it gives you the list of duplicates, but it only surfaces the top 2,000 that it could find. So if the number is exactly the same after you do it, that pretty much means that you you have the duplicates. Ah, okay, there's another thing. You have deduplicated some of them, but then more surfacing up. So in a way, you have more than the 10,069, but that's the maximum it could show you. And therefore, even though you deduplicate it, it's still there. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that if the deduplication happens by a qualify, is it possible that the way HubSpot identifies and counts the duplicates is different to the way Qualify does. And therefore, in a way, both systems are looking at different data sets. So what you're doing with Qualify still works, but in a way, you're not addressing any of the ones that HubSpot had identified.
Yeah, so that could be the case where qualify is not
Yeah.
in the duplicates that HubSpot is taking.
Yeah, I think so. So, do you have a record? Do you have the log as to what has been merged and also, if you were to try to merge some from within HubSpot, just for argument's sake, is in spend 5 minutes at some point and merge 10 records from within there,
Yeah,
does that change the number? Because if that doesn't, then it's even more interesting. But if it does, then it's more likely that the way HubSpot identifies them is not the way Qualify identifies them, and therefore, in a way, they're two different data sets. And that's why, even though you're doing actual work in deduplication on Qualify side, they're none of them, because of how many records you have anyway, they just happen not to overlap, not even for a single person just yet. Of course, the more you deduplicate, the more you get to the point that, well, there's just no way for them not to overlap and for Qualify not to detect those that HubSpot have detected as well. But I would say try the native deduplication within HubSpot and see whether that brings the number down, because if so, then that's more likely to be the case.
okay. I will try that.
Cool.
Thank you, Ellie.
Of course, most welcome.
Well, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for all the answers, Ellie, as always.
You're
And
welcome. I love those sessions. Absolutely love them.
yes, and we'll have one next month. So we
Yeah.
will put it in the Hug event very soon. And feel free to bring more questions, chat, and let's meet again next month.
Fantastic.
See you soon.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a
Bye
lovely
bye.
one.
Good evening.
Bye bye.
Bye.